Hey, what's up guys? You guys want me to bring Andy back? We got a special treat. He is going to go over surfboard tails today. So Andy, what's the plan today? What are we doing?
It's a pleasure to be back and share some of more of my knowledge with you guys out there. And today we're going to go over tail shapes because as Moy says, there's a lot of people writing in about, you know, tail shapes, like what are they good for, what works good for beginners, like tons of questions about tails. So we're going to go over a lot of the basic theory of tail shapes and what they're good for, and basically show off. First, we got some words lined up here, so we're going to
how not to ruin your surfing by picking the wrong tail, or at least knowing what can go wrong, right?
There's some good guidelines I can give you today that'll help you understand tail shapes. Not only the tail shape too, but like the width of the tail, you know, because that also plays a big part, is the width in the tail, but also the thickness of the tail. There's stuff you got to pay attention to, not just the shape of the tail. It's good to know other things like thickness, width, you know, for what type of waves you're riding them in. So we're going to kind of go through.
So let's see what we got here.
First. So I'm going to introduce you to a couple tails here. This is one of my favorite right here that I probably use in most of my boards, which is called the swallow. Looks like, you know, it came after the name of a bird, you know, the swallowtail. And it kind of looks like the swallow's tail. But this is basically, it has two corners coming off of it that actually, it's a really good tail for high performance surfing, because you're turning off these sharp corners, so it has a really good grab and hold. And you can run the concaves off of it really nice. So that's a good tail. This is probably the most common tail that's out there in the world. You see mostly this squash tail, and the squash tail is basically a little bit flat up here with rounded corners. This is a lot of pros ride these, and there's different variations of it, different let's say shapes of the squash. There's more rounded squashes, and then there's ones that even have a corner that's called the square squash. But this one is kind of a beginner squash. You can see it's kind of wide. And then here is kind of an extreme tail. It's called a moon tail, and they've been around for years, but you don't see them much. But basically, this is called a moon tail. Like Rob Machado, it's one of the most famous boards out there right now, the Moonbeam. It has a moon tail, but this is a Firewire. It's kind of a weird fun board with a moon tail on it. This one's an odd board right here. It's got a real narrow tail as far as how wide the nose is. Then this is one of my shapes again here. This is actually called a diamond tail, because it's got kind of a diamond shape to it. And then I put a little bit of curve in there. So that's kind of almost going towards a diamond bat, which we're going to get to down the line here. I got some diamond bats down here. Then this is your classic fish tail. We actually featured this in that last video. And this is the classic fish tail. It's just like a swallow. The difference, some people call the swallowtails fishes. And that's it's not correct, because a swallowtail is like a narrower version of a fish. So fishes are usually wider than a swallow. You can see there's a lot more width on the tail here, and they cut in deeper.
The V is a lot deeper.
Yeah, they cut in deeper, and I could get on.
And a lot of times you see a little bit more round too. I notice in fish.
Yeah, they have a little bit of curve.
More curve.
You don't want to do a straight like the swallow, but these have a lot of bite. There's a lot of holding power in these too. And this actually has a wing in it. So this whole area, also generally the tail starts from here. You know, you talk about this whole area as a tail. This is the tail shape on the end, but basically this has a wing in it, and that's part of the tail. So that's a wing going into the tail of a fish right there. And then this is, we featured this board in the last video too. This is the bat tail, which is one of my favorite tails for small waves. So it's kind of basically like the fish. It's almost the width of a fish. See that? It's got the same width. But what I don't like about the fishes, if you're a really good surfer, a lot of times these wide tails, you want to get your foot farther back. And usually the fish tails won't allow you. But see, this fish doesn't go that deep. There's some fishes that go really deep, and you really can't get your foot as far back. Like let's say the retro fishes, they're a lot wider, and they come into like here. The cutaway goes here, so your foot.
So you can't really pivot surf as much as you have to carve more.
Yeah, you have to stand forward on it more. Whereas this thing's designed where you can get your foot. You see where I got the pad?
Yeah, you can go right up.
Go way back here, and you can really swing the board. So I like this because it's creating corners. Like I told you, I like the corners for bite. You know, this actually has 3 corners. If you see it, this is basically a diamond tail, like I showed you down the line there. And then I create this curve inside the diamond, so it's called the diamond bat. This is kind of one of my tails. I mean, there are other people who made these too, but this is one of my favorite that I probably always have in my quiver. I always have one of these. This is kind of the same model, but it's a little bit more subtle. You know, this is a little wider tail block with a little less cut in it. This one's probably better in smaller waves, like a little bit more surface area back here. And then this is the classic pintail. This is one of my boards for bigger waves, like hollower waves. So this is like a pulled in pin. There's a lot of variations of pintails. This is more of a barrel riding pintail. You've got round tails that go a little bit rounder on the end, but this is kind of your classic pintail.
All right, Andy, so the most popular common tails I think you got lined up here. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What you think? What do you know?
Yeah, I think if you go into a surf shop these days, you're gonna probably see, you know, probably 4 really popular tails. So you'll see other variations, but we're gonna go over the 3 most popular here. Let's say this is the squash tail. So squash tail looks like this. It's got kind of a wide base right here, and then it rounds at the corner. So that's the squash tail. And then I was saying earlier, this is the fish tail. Looks like kind of a fish tail, you know.
Fish
and these are
so
really popular right
yeah.
now. Yeah, it's like there's a lot of different variations too, but this is a good like intermediate fish tail because it's not so wide. Because you got retro fish, you got high performance fish, and a lot of variations of widths and everything. That's the thing about tails too, is you're going to see a lot of different widths in the tail. So you have to also decide, okay, what kind of waves do I ride? What level I'm at? Those are really 2 of the most important things you have to decide first. Like if you're surfing really gutless, mushy waves on an average basis where they don't have much power, and you got to create your power, you actually want a wider tail block because it helps you flow through the wave better. You have more surface area. This is called surface area down here, you know, it's got a wider tail.
More planing, yeah, it'll plane better. Yeah.
Right, so and if you're a beginner, the more, say like entry-level surfer you are, you kind of want more surface area so it's easy to get down the line and pass sections. So this would be a good example of kind of a wide tail. Both of these, they're not extreme though, but both of these would work good in kind of mushy surf. Even like if the waves start getting faster, they would work good too. They're not too extreme in the width department, but and it's also the thickness too. Like if the weaker the waves are, you kind of want more area down here, so you kind of want to feel the tail down here and see, like you'll see differences in thicknesses down here because this is your trailing edge of the board and how the water comes off. So if the wave doesn't have much power, you want some thickness so it actually adds more volume and stability. But if you're going fast through the water, you kind of want it to kind of come down sort of thin so the water cuts off, flows off the board really smooth, and at high speeds it won't slide out on you. There's so much we could go over. That's the thing with tails, is there's a world of knowledge, but we're going to try to go through the basics right now.
Okay.
You know, and then if you can see here, this would be more of an advanced tail. See, if you notice, this is so narrow back here, it goes into a pin, and this is for really high speed situations. So if you're seeing the extremes, this one's more for very, very fast waves, hollow waves. This is my barrel riding board right here, so it would be more like to really grab water at high speeds and not slide out. That's what you don't want, and you can see how thin it goes. Yeah. Compared to this one, which is I don't like to make my tails too thick because I always want my boards that I make to grab water good. You know, I've kept the thickness up here where you need it, and then it flows off.
But if you're a heavier guy, what would you say?
Yeah,
thicker?
heavier. If I had to make a custom board for a heavier guy, I'd definitely be going like another 1/4 inch thick back here.
So like me, my boards would have thicker tails than yours.
Would definitely be. You know, I have thickness checks back here, so it's to control that. And those rail guides I was showing in the last video, I have thicker ones for bigger guys and everything. And, you know, this fishes definitely usually have a little bit more thickness back here.
Yeah, fish always have thicker tails, yeah.
And I kind of categorize tails because there's a lot of different tail shapes out there. You'll see like variations of all these different tails, and there's a lot in the last 10 years there's been so many new tail shapes that have come about. Kind of gimmicky, some of them, but these are the basics. And the thing is, I categorize them in two types. These are tails with corners. These are rounded tails. I like the corner. Personally, my personal favorites are any tail that has the corners. The pin tail has a corner, a point. Let's say point tails. For me, they just grab water better, you know, if you think about it. Whereas these create more stability, but it's a little bit slower rail to rail, and they don't grab the water. When you push off the board, they don't have that holding power at high speed. So that's what I like, is the corners actually grab.
So corner is definitely more advanced. People get use out of it.
Yeah, and it's just, even if you're kind of a beginner, intermediate, and you catch a good wave and you're coming off the bottom, once you sink that rail in, you've got to imagine it. This is what's in the water, and it's grabbing the water. You know, it's like sinking in better, whereas these kind of have a harder time penetrating in the water, I guess.
So quick question. Let's say you have 2 boards that are identical. One is a squash tail, one is a rounded tail. Width is around the same, thickness is around the same, board size and shape is around the same. So they're very similar. Why would I want one versus the other? if they're roughly the same?
I guess as you're talking about width, it would be like the type of wave. So if you've got to surf fast waves all the time, you'd want...
No, but I'm saying the only difference is one is a squash and one is rounded.
Well, the rounded tail definitely is easier to go rail to rail, because in surfing you're hardly ever just standing there going straight, right? You got to try to pump for speed and go rail to rail. So a rounded tail tends to like really go quickly in the transitions rail to rail, whereas a squash will be a little bit slower in the transition, but you have more planing area. It tends to work better in mushier waves, let's say, because it has more planing area and it flows through the water better. But it has less, it's slower rail to rail, as the transitions are a little bit slower. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Because you could have a beginner board that has a squash and a beginner that has a swallow.
Yeah.
You know, like as far as the rest of the board is the width, the thickness, everything is very similar. How would you explain to a beginner?
I guess it's more the width too, because like the heavier too, your weight, you got to take into account what's your weight. So the heavier you are, you want a wider tail, and then the lighter, like women or lightweight kids that are learning, that are trying to scale down in size, they're going to want a narrower board, a narrower tail block, because they can get it in the water. They can sink as they're trying to get the board into the water and do a bottom turn. They can actually get it into the water and not have the board just slide out. Whereas a heavy guy, they'll sink the tail, a narrow tail, so they need that extra volume, let's say volume and width and thickness, so that it doesn't sink on them and they have something to push off of. So it's a lot, it has to do with your weight and your size, how tall you are. There's a lot of stuff to take into account. That's why it is good to work with a shaper or get custom boards, because then they can take into account everything I'm talking about, your skill level, your weight, your size, also your stance. Like for me, when I make boards for people, sometimes I look at how they stand. Some people stand kind of back on the tail more, or maybe they lean forward. A lot of that has to do with how you want to design the tail shape.
Front-footed, back-footed surfers, right?
Yeah, sometimes they have really heavy back-footed surfer. You want that wider tail block, and then, you know, so that's something to take into account as well.
So what can go wrong in a tail? Like, if, you know, like we've all had boards that just didn't feel right. So how can you get it wrong? Like, what can go wrong in a tail?
I guess like I was saying, if you're like a lightweight person, but there's this hyped out board that's like a lot of people are buying, and it's got this really wide tail block, but you're a lightweight guy, it's not really designed for you. And so you can start surfing it and you're really having a hard time getting the thing to turn quickly, or it's sliding out at high speeds. It's because it's got too much surface area for your wave, you know? So I guess it would be more, the width plays a big difference, and sometimes it's with a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, let's say, you know, but really make her to break it. Like there's some tails out there that have huge, like really wide tail blocks that just won't work for a lighter person. And then vice versa, if like a beginner intermediate tries to get a tail like this, and maybe it's got the width forward, it's gonna react too much. It's gonna be too slidey for them, or they won't really know. And like this, for example, this board, to me, for being kind of a high performance fun board, it's got a really narrow, you see the tail block on this one, it's really pulled in compared to like you see the top of the board. It's got like a fun board shape, so it's really wide. I actually look at this board as kind of disproportionate maybe, because it's so wide up here and then it goes into a real narrow tail. So it might be for a heavier person, they'd be able to catch waves on it and maybe go down the line, but when they push into it, that'd be an example of maybe it sink on them a little bit. You know, it would just be it just wouldn't have enough volume for them to get the down the line drive you need, you know. So a lot of it has to do with your weight. So a heavier person needs a wider tail, let's say, general theory. Lighter weight surfers in the 100 to 150 pound range need a narrower tail, basically. So I think the tail shape isn't the end all, really. I mean, most intermediate beginners won't feel the difference between the actual shape of the tail, but the width they will. So I think it's more important finding the right width. You know, no matter what tail you decide you like more, you have to find out what the width would be, you know, that would work good for you. So let's say generally you can take a tape measure and measure like what the width of it is, and let's say like this is 8 inches, this is a fish, so this would be like an 8-inch tail block. That would be great for a bigger surfer, or like a total beginner that's got some weight, whereas like this one's good, like this one's not too wide. This could work for a wide range of people because it's not too exaggerated too wide, and it's not a pulled in squash. So this one's kind of the happy medium, and that's kind of what I like to do in my shapes, is not try to go too extreme anywhere, too narrow like that on a fun board, and not too wide, because this is almost the same shape as this one, 6'8". These are both 6'8". but that tail is like almost half the width, you know. This is kind of more of a happy medium of in between wide and narrow, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So this could work for a wider range of surfers right here.
Gotcha.
Also, it's something to keep in mind too when you buy these kind of tails. I like these kind of tails with the corners. I was saying corner tails I like more, but you have more chances of damaging the corners. They work better, but you know, you're going to have to work on fixing them a lot or taking them.
I've had to ding repair my swallowtails so many times, my fish.
Yeah.
That's why people that have swallowfish, they start putting their boards upside down in the racks, because the nose is a lot less chance of damaging than the really thin tail.
And I think you'll see more squash tails. These kind of tails in surf shops is the most popular tail. And actually, I feel that it's mainly because it's less easy to damage. You know, it's going to be like, it doesn't have the sharp corner, so.
Gotcha.
Generally, I think that's
so,
the reason why.
Video's starting to run pretty long, so let's try to just wrap it up. Any last pieces of advice for people that, you know, trying to pick a tail?
Yeah, when you, just general rule, like I said, when you go into a surf shop, maybe say you're looking for a squash tail, take in mind that width for your weight, and also check out the thickness. If it looks really thick and bulky back here, because I've seen there are a lot of designs out there that kind of, the thickness, it stays pretty thick off the end. And if you're under a certain weight, like 180 pounds, that's just going to have too much volume in the tail. So check the thickness, check the width. Just make sure it's not too exaggerated wide or too narrow, and then just, you know, figure out which tail shape you like the best. You know, what looks good to you, because it's not going to feel too different. But I think the width and the thickness is going to be more important for you to dial in and figure out what's going to look best for you.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, awesome, Andy. So why don't we come back and do another day of tails where you go over like these rare, unique tails that you just don't see that often, like the moon, the bat, diamond, and other crazy,
they're interesting.
Crazy tails.
They're my favorite, but that did take a whole nother blog to do.
All right, cool. So Andy warned me. He said, "Yeah, we could go on and on and on about tails and shapes without. I mean, there's so much in shaping."
Yeah, I could go on tangents about.
Make sure you go and you follow him on Instagram, because he'll be putting stuff up there, and we might actually put unique content over there as well. And then we will definitely do more videos with Andy. Actually, we're going to do another one here in a little bit for another video on bottom contours. Hopefully,
concaves and V's and spiral.
All that stuff. Yeah. So, anyways, look out for that video, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Pura vida and aloha.